Welcome back to ACM TV Tech Corner. Today I'm going to be talking to you about modular synthesis. So what is it? Modular synthesis. It is synthesis in a modular form, meaning that you have the option to choose what you want within a synthesizer, how many of them you want, and where you want them to be. So as you can see here, this is my own personal modular synthesizer setup, and it has in it a range of modules that I believe work well for my own personal needs. Now this is the beauty of modular synthesis. You can build a Frankenstein type synthesizer to exactly the spec you want it, rather than having to buy off the shelf. So let me try and explain this a little bit further. When you buy a normal synthesizer, say a Moog synthesizer or an Ovation one or any other brand, there's loads available, you are set and stuck with the controls that are within that synthesizer. So it would run from, say, oscillators or sound sources, through a filter, through an amplifier, through envelopes and so on. But the signal path is set. It will always be that way, and you kind of have a boundary made for you. Now with modular synthesis, that is completely out of the window. Modular synthesis gives you the option to have each single section of a synthesizer, so the oscillators, the envelopes, the filters, the modulators, the LFOs, anything basically, you can buy as a separate module. And it's up to you what you do with them and how you connect them. So how are they connected? Lead. Mini jack lead. So the leads that you would normally find headphones and so on. This is what connects everything. Now, if you look at the synthesizer itself, you will see it's full of holes. There is plenty of holes in all the different modules. Now this is an array of different modules. I'll count through them so you can see how many there is. We have a power module. We have something called the ornament and crime. Now this one is multiple things in one. It's a sequencer, it's a envelope generator, it's a Turing machine. It does loads of different things in one. We then have a sort of synthesizer in one whole box here. This is like a modeling synthesizer. So it models things like drum sounds, percussive sounds, mallet type sounds, chord type sounds, all within this one module. We then have this one big module here. This is a semi-modular synthesizer in its own right, which you can buy separately, but undo from its original case and put into your own rack. This houses many different modules in one. This, for instance, I have a MIDI to CV module, meaning that I could plug in any other MIDI device, whether it's a MIDI keyboard or a MIDI clock from a drum machine or even from the computer, and it will send out messages, convert them to controlled voltage, which is what this works on, in order to manipulate things. We then have an oscillator, another oscillator, an LFO, a mixer, a filter, an envelope, a VCA, and an output section. Now you can use this as a normal synthesizer, but each of the different sections can be sent to wherever you want them to go to. I can just use the filter from this. Again, this is the beauty of modular synthesis. Next after that, I have something called a disting, this nice slither of a module there. This again, kind of like this ornament and crime. This does so many different things. It can be a sound source, it can be an effect like a reverb or a delay, it can be an LFO, it can be a filter. You decide what you want it to do, going by various algorithms, which are on a little SD card just here. Next we have something called the mutable clouds. This is a cloned version called Monsoon. This is a granular synthesizer. It's also a reverb, it's also a delay, it's also a spectral resonator, loads of other things. We then have an output module where everything gets plugged into to get sent out to be recorded. Bottom left I have a clock divider. So in modular synthesis, things are run via clock, so timing, how you time something. Say I have a square wave that is at a certain frequency. Every time it goes into the positive, it creates a trigger, a clock trigger. I can plug one into here, then those divisions would be sent out via each of the outputs. So for instance, I could have a clock set to 100 BPM, and then I could then divide that by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5, by 6, and so on, to go on and trigger other things time-based. I then have a mult. What this is basically you plug one thing into it and it sends that information out 3 different ways. So you can plug one thing in and get 3 of them out. We then have another clock style generator here, which can be sending clocks out at different times, LFOs, waves, triggers, very important. I then have a sampler. I love a sampler. If you know me from ACM, you know that I love samplers. This is a Euro rack or modular sampler where you can sample in, plug in, into there, like put your phone in or whatever, sample in, and it's got 8 different sample slots of which you can record in and mangle. We then have a mixer, another mixer. I've got one up here, but I've also got another mixer here, which I can use for audio signals. We've then got a VCA, so a voltage controlled amplifier, which basically either turns up or turns down the amount of something. We then have a whole synth voice, kind of like this one, but very small, just here. A full voice, so it's got an oscillator, a filter, an envelope, and so on. We then move along to another filter on its own, just a filter. I've then got another mixer, but a stereo mixer with panning. And then lastly, next to I've got another mult, same as this one, to send signals out to various places. Lastly, a joystick, of which I could send various things to various things, depending on where the joystick is. There are thousands of modules that you can get, varying from single oscillators to single LFOs to full synthesizers like this one that you can put into a rack. The other good thing about this is you can place these things where you want them. It is all encompassing. It is all its own one thing. This can move. Look, this is a whole thing. Like, I can move this about, I can take these out, I can put it upside down, I can lie it down. So let's look at a patching possibility. So for instance, I've got an oscillator section just here. I can take a sine wave out and plug that into a filter over here. Instead of using the filter that's built in, I can then come out of this filter down here and plug this into an effects unit. I could then have the effects coming out of here and then going into another filter from here, or going into the sampler to sample it, or just going straight out to be recorded. Or I could use it as a modulation source, so the noise that I'm accumulating from all of this could then be used to modulate the pitch of oscillator 2. So many different things that you can do with it. Now this system all runs off controlled voltage, whether it's plus 5 volts or plus or minus 12 volts, meaning that's the maximum that you can have within this framework. Controlled voltage means it's anywhere between plus 12 and minus 12 volts. It could be 11 volts, it could be 10 volts, it could be 9 volts, it could be whatever you want it to be within that range. Now, this is fully dependent on the module. In modular synthesis, you have something called voltage per octave. So 1 volt per octave means that every time you add a volt or go up in voltage, you go up in octave of pitch. You can also have this as like a little attenuation knob. So within the attenuation, you are turning down the amount of voltage or turning up the amount of voltage. Now that could be sent to pitch, that could be sent to a filter opening, that could be sent to an LFO amount. So many different things boil down to just simple voltage. 99.9% of the good things about modular synthesis is the journey. Patching something to somewhere and not knowing what you're going to get from it. I've mentioned this before in other Tech Corner videos. A lot of things that we do inside the box are premeditated tasks. Things that we have to think about and then do or put into practice. When it comes to modular synthesis, you are just making noise, and in an area that you can have an idea of the kind of thing you want, but getting to there, you may go off in a completely different tangent and end up somewhere completely different and still usable. I've personally found using modular synthesizers really liberating. I don't feel like I need to make a finished song at the end of a production session. I'm more than happy to just play around with it and make some noise and not even save it at the end. That's the other thing about modular synthesis. There's no save button. Once you unpatch it, that's it. You start from scratch again. Some modules will let you save presets on for certain modules, but again, you have to have them plugged in a certain manner or certain architecture in order to get that same effect back that you had before. If you want to try modular synthesis without physically having to buy a modular synthesizer, there is software versions. One software version is called VCV Rack. It is completely free and it is Mac and Windows compatible. It is a standalone program that can link with any DAW. So if you're interested in modular synthesis, but you're a bit worried about not having a clue what to do with it once you buy it, try VCV Rack out. The link of where you can download this will be in the description under the video, as will the link to Modular Grid. So to conclude, modular synthesis looks good. Kind of worth every penny just for the looks and the aesthetic of it, really, in my opinion. But completely freeing, depending on what modules you want. You get to decide what your synthesizer is going to be. I personally wanted loads of oscillator options and sound source options. I wanted to be able to sample in it with an old school workflow like an old Akai 950 or something like that. I wanted to have options for filters, I wanted to have performance options, I wanted to have loads of effects. So all of the modules that I sourced, researched and bought did that for me. And it was all laid out in a way that works personally for me. You could have exactly the same modules and exactly the same setup, but you would have them in a completely different arrangement and use them all differently. That's the beauty of modular synthesis. So thank you very much for watching. Check the links in the description for VC VRAC and Modular Grid. If you're interested in this kind of stuff and you see me about the campus, stop me and I'll be more than happy to talk to you more about modular synthesis. Take it easy and I'll see you next time.